Cold War was a political tension between the United States and the Soviet Union that began in 1947 and ended in 1991. This conflict affected the allies of each country, which in return created two factions named the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. By 1949, the United States and its allies formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a military alliance in an effort to limit the influence of the Soviet Union in the promotion of their communist propaganda. In response to this action, in 1955, the Soviet Union created the Warsaw Pact. During the many years the Cold War lasted, many conflicts arose, and some of them developed in military confrontations. Between 1950 and 1953, the Korean War developed into the division of Korea, North Korea under communist government and South Korea a democratic government. In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis placed the United States and Soviet Union face to face in the Atlantic. From 1964 until 1975, the Vietnam War ended with the division of the country, a situation that only lasted for a few years. The Cold War not only affected the geopolitical scenario of the world, but it involved science and sports. The constant competition to prove which doctrine was better provoked scientists from both sides to compete to show who came with the best advances in areas like medicine and technology. In the 1950s, the United States and the Soviet Union began a competition to explore space. The space race started, and it didn't start in a good way for the United States. Soviet Union was leading the way, being the first to send an artificial satellite to lower orbit, the Sputnik 1. After that, the Soviets sent the first man to space. Yuri Gagarin became a national hero. The United States finally took the lead with the launch of the Saturn and Apollo missions, made an American the first to step on the surface of the moon. This competition continued until the development of the space shuttle. In sports, in 1980, the Summer Olympic Games were hosted in Moscow, the capital city of the Soviet Union. The United States decided to boycott the Olympic Games, not participating in them. This action influenced 65 countries to do the same. These actions made the 1980 Olympic Games the one with the smallest participation since 1956, with only 80 countries participating. After the boycott of the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow, the Soviet Union decided to boycott the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Similarly to the strategy used by the United States 4 years prior, the Soviet Union decided not to participate due to security concerns. 14 other nations followed the Soviet Union's decision. Regardless of this boycott, the Los Angeles Olympic Games, called the Friendship Games, gathered 140 countries. In 1980, Ronald Reagan became President of the United States. As President, Reagan proved to have a strong bias against the Soviet Union and its ideology. Reagan promised to increase the military presence and confront the Soviet Union everywhere. In June 1987, during a visit to Berlin, President Ronald Reagan gave a speech in front of the Brandenburg Gate, a symbol of division created as a consequence of the political and economic differences between the United States and Soviet Union. In this speech, President Reagan invites the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to open the gates of that place. Even more than that, President Reagan requested to tear down this wall.